I'm upset. One of the policies you can ask every single of our prospects when we're on a sales call. It's kind of like an unwritten rule for us. We never go like negatively against the competition. Before you throw mud at like in a David versus Goliath style, why don't you just innovate and build better products so that nobody would actually care? So to me, it looks like we're just such a strong competitor that it is now time to talk negatively about that.
And we're live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Good Thing. As usual, we're a little bit late. I apologize. That was on my behalf. But again, I'm joined by Jens. Jens, how are you doing today?
So when we don't have guests, now I am your special guest.
Yeah, and then when we do have guests, you're just my guest.
Yeah.
I like
Do
it.
you know like who is it? Is it Jimmy Kimmel or someone? They have like this the thing on the side like a skeleton, or what is it?
Yeah, I forgot who it was though, but he has the skeleton. It has a name.
Yeah, the skull.
Yeah, that's you.
I'm your skull.
Yeah, I mean, when we don't have a guest, for sure. But it's good to have you back on the show. We've been off for a little bit, so apologize. But we're working on getting more guests, and we're going to be working on a better cadence with Jacob. So it's going to be awesome. We're going to keep going forward. We're doubling down on our content strategy. But I think today's going to be an interesting episode. I'm not as bubbly today because the reports of our demise, as the name of the title, have been greatly exaggerated. And honestly, one of my favorite things about being a founder and following other founders is how passionate they get. Like you see Elon Musk yelling at Sam Altman on Twitter, or you see Guillermo yelling at the Replit founder, and people are like, "Oh, you're bigger than that." But I've always been a guy that passion is important. If you watch tennis, Novak Djokovic, he gets upset. Cristiano Ronaldo gets upset. All the best players in the world get upset. And it's the same thing in founders because it's a high stakes game. And so recently there's been a lot of reports. And I know Jens, he's a little bit less emotional than me, but if you piss him off, he comes in with the facts. Jens, talk to me a little bit about what's been said in the community recently, especially around GraphQL Conf and like the direction that we're going. It's a little bit upsetting. I'm not going to lie to you. He's trying to think of it as the most political way he could say it.
I don't know. I'm typically ranting, but how would you put it? What was being said?
Well, a little bit of backstory. So you guys know about WunderGraph. We've been really focusing on federation, and it's gotten to a point where customers are coming to us and they're like, "Wow, you really know your stuff." And you're like, "Huh? If you've been working on this since 2018, you think you would know." And we do. We love federation. We love solving problems for our customers. And when you start to eat a little bit of the market share, sometimes people will look at you like a toy and they'll be like, "Oh, that's cute what they're doing over there." But then slowly that toy gets bigger and bigger and they start eating more and more and they give them bigger customers. And then they go, "Oh my God, there's a threat." And so recently, Apollo has deemed us as a threat and has been just putting blatant lies, if you will, into the ecosystem, saying things about us. We can talk about what happened at GraphQL Conf, why we didn't go, why we're investing into Federation. But basically, the backstory is competitors have been saying that we're moving away from Federation, which, by the way, I think is ridiculous. But Jens, could you set the record straight? Are we moving away from Federation?
Like obviously not, and I think we're the biggest innovators in the space actually. If you look at our blog, wundergraph.com/blog, you will find, I don't know, 100 plus blog posts from myself and teammates, but mostly from myself about the topic of GraphQL and federation. I think I'm the only person, or I'm the number one person. And by the way, I'm not bragging at all. Like if you know me, I'm never someone like I never put myself on a podium or something. It's not what I do. I'm more like a factful person. But I'm number one person to write blog posts about GraphQL and federation. Absolutely, just by numbers. So why would we not care about federation? Just recently, we solved a very, very interesting problem together with eBay. eBay is, I would say, one of the biggest users in GraphQL and federation. and they didn't just partner with us. They are not a customer, not just a customer. They are also an investor. And what this relationship allows us to do is, first of all, we're building an open source implementation of GraphQL Federation. And people, like, if you throw mud at us and you're like, oh, we're doing Cosmo Connect, we're doing gRPC on the backend side, we're moving away from Federation, then my first answer will be like, what do you mean by Federation? Like, what spec? And the reality is, there never was a spec. There will never be a spec currently, because Apollo doesn't want a spec. Apollo doesn't want competition. I think competition is amazing for the customer, for the market. And the other thing is, currently there's this Composite Schema working group. It's driven by Chili Cream people, and Apollo does a little bit of consulting. So the people who drive the space, is it Apollo? And then, like, before you throw mud at like in a David versus Goliath style, why don't you just innovate and build better products so that nobody would actually care? So to me, it looks like we're just such a strong competitor that it is now time to talk negatively about that, about us. And honestly, one of the policies we always had, and I'm upset,
Yeah.
and I'm reconsidering this, but one of the policies you can ask every single of our prospects when we're on a sales call, we really try to avoid mentioning names of our competitors, just because we don't want to focus on competition. We want to focus on solving the customer problem. And it's kind of like an unwritten rule for us. We never go like negatively against the competition. We always focus on, okay, customer, how can we help them? What can we do? And it's just, I don't know, it's a change in behavior. We take note, and our take is to focus on customers, to focus on relationships with people like eBay. By the way, ask yourself, why is one of the biggest users of Federation, why are they leaving the market leader? Why are they going with us, building something open source together? And what is this relationship leading to? Because if you look at what we recently built with eBay, it's actually quite interesting, because thanks to eBay, we can solve problems in Federation that you don't even know exist, and we solve them today, for you to use tomorrow. So to give you one example, eBay has a use case where, if you have a very sensitive piece of information in your graph, for example, when a listing on the eBay page ends or something, because you don't want to tell everybody when the listing ends, because it could be used for market manipulation or whatever. So the problem here is, Apollo introduced the requires directive, and again, like, not negative against Apollo, but the point is, if you introduce such a directive, you need to think about the consequences, the repercussions, and what are the effects of using such a directive. In our case, what we figured out through eBay is, when one service has a sensitive field and another service says through the requires directive, I want to have that field to resolve another field, unknowing of the other service, another team now has access to that field. So if you try to follow compliance regulations and one service is, I would say, like, audited and is compliant, and now another service can just request that field, you might not even be aware of that. So it creates a loophole in your system.
Yeah.
There's a component of authorization where you think authorization is something that happens between the client and the server. In Federation, authorization also happens between subgraphs. And it's very important to think about the mechanics and what happens if one subgraph requires a field from another one. So we introduced a new directive. I think it was something like fetch reasons, or I don't know. David, you can tell me on the chat what's the right name. It's also on our docs. And if you enable that, we will essentially tell in metadata one subgraph. We will tell them that require fetch reasons. Thanks, David. So if you put that on a field, and the field is being requested, we tell the subgraph why we're requesting that, and so now we're compliant. Another issue we found through eBay is also, again, requires, if you require a field from another subgraph and that field doesn't resolve and it returns an error and the field is nullable, we would then render an entity representation call to that subgraph and send null. And this is a problem because null might not be like a valid key or something. So then the second subgraph is confused because it requires that field. So if there was an error, we should actually stop. Or we should think about the meaning of null. And that is another interesting topic. We recently added support for semantic non-null. There was a huge discussion in the GraphQL community around semantic non-null and how can you distinguish nothing where nothing has a meaning. So absence of a value can have a meaning, or it can mean there is no data, or it can mean there was an error, and you need to distinguish all these cases. And semantic non-null does that, and we're I think the first federation solution that supports it. It doesn't matter that we're the first or something. That's not the point. But the point is we're heavily investing, and instead of talking negatively about us, just be better. And I can assure you, the reason we didn't go to the shit, this monologue is long. the reason we didn't go to the conferences, we recently really scaled the team, and we're focusing on three very, very big projects, and we had to make a very difficult decision. We just thought like, okay, it's not the right timing. Like this year, we had some projects that slipped a bit, and then our roadmap wasn't executed the way we wanted to, which was to some degree it was my mistake. And so this year we just couldn't make it. But I can assure you, 3 products are coming over the next couple of months. This will be like game changing in the community. All products focus on GraphQL and Federation, and so apologies for not coming and for not sponsoring and doing more, but we just didn't want to distract the team. And that's where we currently are.
I think it's a good segue though. So we have a very fun hire that's going to be joining us on Monday. And the reason why it's fun is our strategy for 2026 is we're going to be at a lot of events. We're going to be at a lot of meetups. So something to keep in mind as we set those out, mark it and set it up on your calendars once those invites go out. But Jens, I think you hit on some couple good points there. But our product roadmap, one of the things also that we've been hearing about everywhere is MCP, 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 AI. And we released MCP actually before Apollo did. We have customers using it and they give us feedback on it and they love it. But what is your take on AI and Federation, and how is it going to change things? And just your overall take on MCP. I know you sent me an interesting blog post yesterday that I read, so it'd be good to kind of reference that one. But talk to me a little bit about our strategy with AI and MCP.
Yeah. So when MCP came out, we were like, okay, let's take a look. Let's build something. Let's bring it into the market and see what happens. And as loud as other vendors want to shout, there currently is no interesting business model in the world of MCP and GraphQL. You can have a GraphQL schema and you can put MCP on top, and now you have MCP things, and you can somehow talk to your graph, do persistent operations or something, and like LLMs are cool. Like there are some use cases that are really, really interesting. And at the same time, if my graph isn't designed well, and if my federation doesn't work, then your MCP also doesn't work. And I think the biggest problem for MCP that federation can solve is we can help you put all data sources together, have like a centralized governance and integration layer, and through Cosmo Connect, we can make it super simple to add not just REST APIs, but really anything. Like even like we can turn a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet into an API. Like anything can be a subgraph now. And so I think that's an important point. Governance and access controls and access policies, that's a very big topic, and we're investing into that. But ultimately, I think what federation can give you is the backbone of MCP. It can be that integration layer, but like what can you really do on the MCP side? Like, yeah, you can put an MCP server on top, and now an LLM can talk to some tools. That's nice, but is it worth like the super big hype? And for us, this is something we were thinking about heavily. And one thing we kind of concluded is, if you have a graph and you have MCP, at what point will MCP stop to be efficient in terms of, imagine you have, and there's case studies, and I can, if you're interested, you can DM me. I can give you some link to some papers, but there's case studies about the efficiency of LLMs to choose models, to choose tools. And the problem is, if you add too many tools, then stuff gets out of hand, and the LLM is less and less efficient in choosing the tool. And so one topic that we're currently investing in is, if I have a question, if I have a prompt, how can I figure out the subset of the graph that is relevant to me? And this is a very big problem, because if you have a huge graph with thousands of types or hundreds of thousands of types, the next big challenge will be, how can I choose, or how can I create a tool from that graph that really solves my problem? And if you dive into that space, I've seen demos from other vendors, and what they do is they take the schema, they give it to Cursor, and then they ask Cursor to create a query. And so we investigated this. We tried these kind of things out. The performance is really, really bad, and the accuracy. And oftentimes the problems come from, surprise, bad documentation. So if you have a GraphQL schema and the types are not well documented, the entities are not well documented, the fields don't have meaningful documentation, imagine the following scenario. Let's say you have the GitHub schema, and you remove all kinds of all descriptions, everything. It's just the schema, just types and fields. And let's say you come to the documentation of GitHub, and you're not an API expert, you're not a GraphQL expert, you don't know so much about GitHub in general, and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm interested. I want to see all my repositories and the amount of stars I have or something. And now let's imagine on a semantic level that there is no endpoint to give you the amount of stars, or maybe GitHub uses different language for that. So you can't just take the entirety of the GitHub schema, dump it into into an LLM and ask the LLM to build a query. By the way, LLMs cannot guarantee you like that the query will be valid. So they have to somehow iterate and validate, and you don't want to pollute the entire schema. You need to figure out what parts of the schema are relevant for this use case. And sometimes the user doesn't really understand the language of the schema. So you need to have like a translation layer. So that whole problem of how can I help someone understand, because if you want to build a query, it's ultimately about understanding the graph. And so we're currently investing into how can we make it easier for people to understand the graph and then take their requirements and turn that into valid queries. And that's like a very, very big and complex topic.
It's tough.
It's also not a pure MCP or GraphQL or LLM topic. Like a lot of machine learning and algorithms go into that. And yeah, it's an interesting topic. And I hope kind of what I say, it underscores how much are we thinking about this kind of space, and by no means we're looking elsewhere.
Today's show is sponsored by Jens's monologues. No, I'm kidding. The monologues are fantastic. It kind of shows exactly how we feel about this. I'm still a little bit confused. One of the things that we've been talking about though hard is the entity layer. People might not be understanding what you mean by it. And again, this is going to trigger another monologue, but it's important. What is the real magic behind this entity layer? And how does that feed into our AI strategy? How does that feed into the products that we're building, which are coming soon? As you mentioned, we left, or we weren't able to join GraphQL Conf just because of our roadmap. I mean, things have exploded. We've scaled up the team. Everything's going good from a company point of view. But what is the entity layer? Like, why is it so special, and how does it feed into AI?
Why do you keep hammering against your microphone?
Is it me again?
No, it's, I don't know, your uncle.
Maybe. No, it's the stupid chair. I ordered a new one, though. I don't know. I'm going to step away from the mic. I'll put it here, though.
You just said we have an AI strategy. Why are you leaking that?
Oops.
Oops.
But talk to me about the entity layer.
Can you have a startup in these days without an AI strategy?
No, you can't. I mean, you won't get funding and you'll die. Like in this climate, it's a nuclear wasteland. It's all about AI.
Yeah. Okay, entity layer. David asking about innovations. I mean, you're joining our all hands, right? I mean, maybe you should just listen. Kidding. Okay, entity layer. So, federation is cool. I truly think like some folks at some very smart engineers are or have been at Apollo, who created the first version of federation. And I think one of the coolest concepts they came up with is the key directive, which gives us entities. After the key directive, I kind of think that Apollo went into a little bit of a rush. Maybe it came from their early success, but some other directives they feel a little bit rough, a little bit off. But I talked about this in the past. Anyways, key directive, I think it's very good, because if you think about the key directive, so I keep talking, I would say less about federation and a little bit more about the entity layer, because I think you can see the entity layer as a construct, as a pattern independent of federation. Federation is kind of like tightly coupled to GraphQL, and our kind of thinking is that having a graph is really key to creating a good microservice architecture. The big question is, do we need to have GraphQL on the front end, and do we need to have GraphQL on the back end? What are the benefits? And if we look at, I mean, you can see what we're doing with Cosmo Connect, and we're replacing GraphQL on the backend side. But I see very little benefits, to be honest, in having GraphQL on the back end. It simply means you need GraphQL frameworks that understand these very, very weird root fields like underscore servers and underscore entities, and then you have this any type and all that stuff, like these kind of hacks that allow Federation to send batched requests to subgraphs, like that. I mean, it's all hacks to make it work, but why hacking when you can have a really good solution? We're currently building, I think, the best possible solution that can still be compatible with the existing Federation stack, and that's Cosmo Connect, which means on the backend side we take a GraphQL schema, a subgraph schema, we compile it into a proto, and then we have a proto that understands data loading. So that means the router by default solves the data loading problem. You never need to think about data loading ever again. You just implement resolvers like RPC calls that say, hey, give me 10 products for these IDs, and then you return 10 products, and batching and everything, it's handled. So that means you never need to do a data loader again. Which, by the way, one of the biggest adoption blockers for teams to efficiently build good GraphQL servers, GraphQL backends, is data loading. It's always something everybody new to the topic, they need to learn it. With Cosmo Connect, write a schema, compile it, implement the resulting proto, done. Okay, so that's the backend side. So on the backend side, why GraphQL? We don't need it. But what we need is entities. So again, entities. And then on the front end side, there's like a big group of people who absolutely fell in love with relay and fragments. And I belong to that group. Big fan. Like I think like the triple D, like data-driven dependencies, defining your data requirements per UI component with a fragment, hoisting up the fragments, compiling them into one query per route, etc., etc. I think that's the right approach. However, not so many people need that, and there are many API consumers who would prefer something different. Like, for example, MCP doesn't care about fragments at all. We don't need relay. We just need to have like a query. Or like maybe we want an SDK. Also doesn't need, like SDKs don't benefit from GraphQL. It's just overhead. Just give me an SDK. So an SDK, ideally, it's just kind of like a REST API or at least like JSON RPC. So that means on the left side of the router, on the client side, we could have GraphQL. We could have MCP, we could have JSON RPC or whatever. And on the right side, we could have GraphQL, but we could also have gRPC or something. So that leaves us in the middle with, well, if we don't always need federation, then maybe we need to have a better term for defining what this middle tier is actually about. And for me, it's all about entities. So that's why I call it the entity layer. And from my perspective, the entity layer is extremely powerful. You have objects. Each object is an entity if it has a key. This key uniquely defines how we can find in our microservice architecture, how we can find this thing. And the router knows what subgraphs to ask to get information about the thing. The router knows that we use the key to go to the subgraph, and the router knows from the subgraph schemas which subgraph has which fields on the entity. So the entity layer is like a graph of types with unique identifiers. And these unique identifiers, they are absolutely amazing because what they give us is we can use them as cache keys. So we can stick an entity into Redis and we can get it back from Redis through the name of the type of the entity and the key. Or we can use EDFS, event-driven federated subscriptions, or how we called it lately, Cosmo Streams. where you have a Kafka topic and you get messages, and each message contains a type name and a key. So it's actually it's an entity. And so you have entities, you can access them from subgraphs, you can use them for caching, for cache invalidation, or you could even use like backend cache filling mechanisms. You could say, oh, if something changes in the backend, you put a message on Kafka, the router reads that, resolves the entity from subgraphs, and sticks it into Redis. So next time a consumer comes there, they can actually read that right from the cache. Like you can do like so many things. And then if you build that entity layer, just ask yourself, if I'm not always using GraphQL to access it, maybe we just name it more generic. So I call it entity layer.
No, well said. And for all the viewers that we have, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're kind of setting the record straight on WunderGraph's direction and with Federation and where we're going. We just finished talking a little bit about the entity layer, and it's a concept that Jens is constantly bringing up, and it makes sense. It's kind of exciting. And Jens, next topic I want to talk about is gRPC. We hear this a lot, and somebody, I wonder who, said that we're pivoting into gRPC. I don't think that's true. The last time I heard, in our all hands, I don't think we talked about that. Can you help me understand a little bit, like, why do you feel so strongly that the next generation of Federation speaks gRPC? And for those that might not be unfamiliar, you might want to take a look at Cosmo Connect. It's a feature that we've released. It's really powerful, and we really believe that the next iteration of Federation speaks gRPC. So Jens, what do you think about that topic?
So
Jacob's going to put the meme here, calculating, like the Windows, the blue thing.
Yeah. Okay. Like I said, with the entity layer, you have root fields in a graph, and they are kind of like query, like search fields. So they can have like search params, and then they return a thing. All right. So these root fields, you send them to a resolver, and that returns a thing. In a federated graph, this thing is typically an entity. So that means after the first layer of data fetching, everything else is entity calls. Like, so you say, oh, I have product, and for this product with ID 7, give me other fields, give me reviews. And I'm not saying that for one product, I'm saying it for 100 products. So we need batching there. Okay. So if I want to efficiently batch those requests, why do I need to build a GraphQL server? I don't get it. Why do I need a framework? And the thing is, Apollo created a situation where if you ever want to see any sort of innovation on the federation layer, what you have to do is you have to extend the non-existing spec. So by spec, I mean you just document like 2 lines where you say, oh, here's a new directive. Nobody knows how it works, but here's the directive. Then you implement it in the router. And then you implement it in all subgraph frameworks. And that means you have a huge lag. And oftentimes you can see that on the compatibility side of Apollo Federation. It can take years, and then you still don't have support in all frameworks. So that means Apollo has a monopoly on owning what is possible in the federation layer. And what we're doing with Cosmo Connect is we move GraphQL into the router, and we move GraphQL at build time to like the composition layer. So you have composition, it gives you a schema and everything. Then we compile it into gRPC. And because we compile it into gRPC, the dependency on the subgraph layer essentially is just vanilla gRPC. So what that means is if we add a feature to the router, it is available to Python, .NET, Java, Rust, Kotlin, every language that supports gRPC. It's immediately available. If we can make an improvement, it's immediately available to everybody. The second part is, let's talk about the request chain. And let's say you have a GraphQL request. It comes from the client to the router. The router parses the query. It normalizes it. It inlines fields. It inlines fragments. It does all the magic, which is super expensive. So we have a cache for that. And after all this magic is done, we stick that into the cache, and then we make our subgraph requests. So now we know exactly, okay, we have a root field, and then we have subfields. So we do like entity calls and whatever. And when we do these entity calls, we know we need to do batch calls. Why should we now take the all the efficiencies we have in the router, generate text, and send, because GraphQL query is text, send that text to the framework. And now the framework, the Subgraph framework, needs to parse the text, needs to analyze it, needs to normalize it, needs to validate it, needs to implement data loading to now efficiently resolve that query. All this stuff already happened in our router. And now you have to do it again. Why? All we need to do is we need to call a bunch of resolver functions. So in terms of efficiency, something that is talked a lot about is how fast can your router be? My question for you is, how fast is your subgraph? Because in our case, most of the time, like in benchmarks, what people do is they use Rust as the subgraph framework. But what if you have Node.js or Python or Elixir or something that is not crazy fast in parsing GraphQL queries? So suddenly the router is good and the backend is actually your bottleneck. So that's one part of the story. And to round off this monologue, here's my last point, Stefan.
For now, last point for now.
For now, yes. Cosmo Connect is available in two flavors. One flavor is you deploy the gRPC service as a dedicated service. So it actually is a dedicated service that lives somewhere. And the second shape you can use Cosmo Connect is you deploy your subgraph as a plugin. So it runs like a co-processor side by side with the router. And if you run a subgraph as a co-processor, that means it's ultra low latency and it's zero overhead in deployment. So you're not deploying another thing. So now here's the question. So you have Apollo connectors where you put directives on your schema and then it can do REST APIs. So with Cosmo Connect, you have a plugin, and this plugin runs with the router. So kind of zero overhead. It's super cheap. And this plugin, it's kind of like behaving like a subgraph, except you don't need to know anything about GraphQL. You don't need to know anything about federation. There's no keys. There's no directives. It's just pure gRPC. Stefan, question for you. If you have something that is very simple, a very simple interface, and it can contain custom logic, and this custom logic, it can contain whatever we want. It is very simple to implement. It is very easy to test. And it's very quickly to actually write that just a little bit of code because there's no framework, nothing. It's really just gRPC. What kind of modern, cool solution could we hand this to do nice things?
Sounds like AI, maybe an LLM, cursor.
This is intentional. So what we were thinking of at the very beginning is, what is the next wave of building graphs? And how can we add more capabilities to our graph? And one big blocker we found is everybody has a lot of legacy. They have REST APIs, SOAP APIs, databases, whatever, like just old services. Nobody wants to touch them. And somehow we want to onboard them to the graph. So what we did is we intentionally created Cosmo Connect as a system where the interface is so insanely simple, so dumb, it's just a gRPC proto, that an LLM can easily, with a little bit of system prompting and guidance, an LLM can easily implement it. If you take an Apollo Federation subgraph, I tried to implement subgraphs with LLMs. Yeah, the results are mixed. Sometimes it works. Most of the time something is wrong, so I have to iterate. So that means me as the driver, I have to understand federation. And I want to create a system where the driver, the integrator, doesn't have to understand federation. So ideally, I can just take a schema, run it through a compiler, and then ask Cursor to implement that. And this is how we designed Cosmo Connect, because with the approach of what Apollo did with Apollo connectors. So you have these directives in the schema, and there's very, very few, like in the global scheme of text available online, like the amount of GraphQL schemas with Apollo Connect directives is like zero. Like it you will not find it in the training data. So that means LLMs will never really understand how Apollo connectors work, because it's a custom solution. So the only way you get an LLM to do Apollo Connect right, or Apollo connectors to do it right, is through system prompting and iteration and other things, and it's never going to be efficient. So our approach here is with Cosmo Connect, we just have gRPC. So we remove GraphQL, we remove entities and everything. We just have a proto, and we tell the LLM, hey, here's a proto, and in this handler, we want to make a call to a REST API. Here's the Open API spec. Implement this. So I'm saying the future of federation is that you will tell an LLM that you want to add a new capability to the graph. It will design the graph for you. And the second step is you tell it that here's a proto and there's the REST API, and it will implement that. It will run add tests. It will verify everything. And so the user, the architect, they will be responsible for iterating and designing the schema and telling an LLM to implement it. But and I think like gRPC is quite an old technology. LLMs know a lot of content about gRPC. They understand how to write code for that, and so we think that is the superior solution.
Well said. Well said. And one of the other topics I wanted to talk about is, it's interesting. Apollo Summit was a couple days ago. And funny enough, we didn't do any pranks this time. I think we should have, but maybe next time we'll see, even if there is a next time. But Apollo announced some things. And Jens, what is your unfiltered take on what they announced? If I'm completely honest with you, I was a little bit underwhelmed in some of their announcements. Wasn't thoroughly impressed, but from your point of view, what are some of the things that you thought were interesting, or did you think anything was interesting from the summit?
There was a blog post. Do you have like a link or something?
Let me get it one sec.
Because like in general, I think there was some interesting topics. One interesting topic was like templates for observability tooling, so that you can easily see or easily set up like New Relic and Datadog. It's actually a problem that we have as well. We keep teaching our customers how to do it. Then they announced, but this is like a small, like incremental thing. Then they announced an operator. Very interesting concept. Actually, in the Kubernetes space, it's quite an old concept. I think like 5 years ago or something, we started seeing operators. Someone sent me something, right? Did you?
Yeah, I just sent it to you. So I sent you everything that they announced in the blog post.
Okay, let me see. So MCP server, yeah, we have MCP. Then Graph runtime APM templates. I think that's a good thing. It improves the developer experience for platform teams. Also the operator, that's also very interesting to make deployments better. Like operator kind of goes hand in hand with graph artifacts, where you publish an artifact and it contains the schema and everything. That's super funny because it's actually something we also looked into in the past. We haven't executed yet, but one thing we figured out is that some of our customers, when they build a subgraph, they take the schema, stick it into the OCI, into the Docker image, and then when they deploy the service, they kind of use OCI tooling or Docker commands to pull it out again. So that's kind of interesting. We will also add something very similar in the future. Apollo connectors enhancement. We talked a bit about connectors. And let me see, MCP tools. Yeah, we have MCP for quite a long time. I think one of the biggest differences in of Apollo and WunderGraph is they do marketing a bit louder, but okay, that's fine. And other than that, when people tell, like, and I answered that in the beginning, but when people say like, oh, WunderGraph is not bullish on federation anymore, like, who is bullish on federation? And I don't see the improvements. Like what we're building with eBay, and we have more things to go. I don't know. There's features like defer, for example. If you look into defer, like Apollo is really good at marketing things that they have, but they actually don't really have them, because if you compare the implementation of, like, there's this old, it's a Node.js gateway from the guild, which I guess it kind of has like one of the best implementations of federation, actually, or the most complete. Like, it's not like super fast because it's Node.js, but it's quite complete. And if you compare how they do defer versus Apollo router, like Apollo router support for defer is like very dumb, and it cannot really split complex queries. It doesn't really defer. But they have it in the marketing, and I think that's like a theme that I see with Apollo. They add a feature, they market the hell out of it, but they never really complete the things. And that's, I don't know.
What's funny is you had a little Freudian slip. Defer, deburgless.
The defer burlers.
So funny.
Did you know that, like, a while ago I did an interview with Matt DeBurgeles? I have it still on my camera. I never published it.
Should we publish it? It was from GraphQL Conf 2023, I think, right?
I'm not sure, like, how interesting it is. It's
in the vault.
Like, I have to say, I can differentiate it. Okay, so when some people talk negatively about our company, I don't like that. And at the same time, I can respect Matt, because I think he's a smart person and a good engineer. And we had conversations in the past, not so many just recently, and like leadership at Apollo also changed a little bit. But like, in general, I think the ethos inside WunderGraph is that we are a very engineering focused company. And by the way, we have a lot of open roles, like very, very interesting roles. For example, you can help us work on algorithms, on improving the federation tooling and everything. But what I'm trying to say is, like, we're very engineering focused, and we respect other engineers. Like, we're probably not the best marketers, or we're not known for our sales strategies or something, but in terms of engineering, the companies that work with us, we have very close relationships. When you are a customer, it is very rare that you don't talk to engineers, that you don't talk to founders. Whenever a topic gets more interesting, it's typically like I'm the product owner of WunderGraph, so I'm typically involved. But if you don't know me, I'm also like an engineer. Sometimes I code on WunderGraph, but it's becoming less and less just because we have a lot of people and stuff to do, and everybody has a question. But yeah, so we're very engineering focused, and we really respect engineers. And yeah, I think on that, you are my I'm testing for Nithin, for example. We're working on Hub together. Actually, next week we meet in Cologne. So if you're an engineer, if you want to join a rocket ship, if you want to work with a cool crew of people like Nithin or David, and if you sometimes want to meet in person, then WunderGraph is a really nice place to join. Later this year, we will all meet in Gran Canaria, where we have our last retreat for this year. And then for next year, we have some very big plans. We just hired a field marketer, so we will be much more in person. We will come to conferences, and we will have a lot to talk about.
Cool. Well said. Really want to emphasize on the hiring. So we're hiring all across roles. I know Jens said that we're stronger on engineering. Yes, I totally agree. We're an engineering first company, but we're hiring on the marketing because we want to improve, and we're hiring on the sales team. So if you want to come join us, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of pipeline for you guys to join us, but also on the engineering thing, there's so much ownership. One of the things I love about WunderGraph is everybody owns something, and you can go and work with Nathan. And I know he would love a little bit more help on Hub, but okay, fantastic. And then Jens, I think I kind of covered through all my points. I mean, we went through every single thing, and I think you addressed it pretty well. From your end, do you have any questions or anything that you want to add? We have quite a decent amount of viewers today. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us this Friday morning. We're definitely going to keep it coming. We are going to a bi-monthly or every 2 weeks, but who knows? Maybe Jacob, if this keeps going, we go back to every week. We'll see, but we should have some guests coming onto the pod. But Jens, anything from your end?
Yeah, we have 53 people currently on the stream. So it's Jacob, David, and Nathan, and then 50 annoyed salespeople from Apollo.
No.
Stefan,
Three just left, by the way. 3 just left because you said that.
Okay. Yeah, that was too much. Stefan, question for you. How do you, like, as a junior developer? No, but for real. From your perspective, I mean, you asked quite a few questions. How do you currently feel about the climate, and what do you think about, like, API space versus AI space, and where do you see us in the next year?
It's a great question. So, like, there's 2 hats. From the founder point of view, like the AI space, it's the only thing investors will talk about. I fundamentally believe, actually, you told me this. So there's a great book that Jens recommended, which was The Rise and Fall of Empires. And what it means is that everything that's happening in your life, a pandemic, a war, or AI or a technology boom, it's already happened. You just weren't alive when it happened. And so you can see the rise and falls of empires through history by reading a lot of books. And Jens recommended this book, and I read it. And one of the things I did is I pieced together the timeline of technology. And when the internet came in the 90s, like actually came, we had a dot-com boom. And it completely changed everything, and everybody knew that it was here to stay. But you also had the naysayers that were like, oh, it's just a fad, it's going to pass. If we go forward into history, we're going through the exact same thing right now. 90% of these AI companies are either going to get killed by OpenAI, or they're just not going to find product market fit after their initial boom. So we're in this period right now where everything's trying. What that means from the founder point of view is that money is cheap if you're riding on that boom. So AI is definitely something as a founder. But 2, from a technology point of view, AI is going to make a difference. It's absolutely here to stay, and it's going to make a difference into every single thing. For example, I was telling Jens today, I booked my flight for Gran Canaries by talking to somebody on WhatsApp. And it wasn't somebody, it was an
Somebody.
LLM. Yeah, it was an LLM. They answered nearly, they booked my flight, they knew all my passport information, they booked it using my credit card, and it was done by texting my own personal concierge. So I think from an AI point of view, what we're building is super exciting, which translates to my next point on APIs. But AI from a founder point of view, if you want to get money, you have to do something with AI, or at least wait till it crashes. But a very wise man once told me, he said, with fads or with trends, you either watch from the side or you join them, but don't go against them. And I typically think that's actually quite a true thing to say. So with the AI angle on the founders, I think it's important. And I really like the approach that we're taking. With APIs, if you know about the space, it's tough. And I'll go back actually at one point, because as a junior developer, AI has made my life so much better. So I'm building small projects on the side. I could just talk to it in English. Like, I made a stupid project and I put it on Hacker News, and I had a couple people sign up for it. And I was able to do that in 30 minutes just because I was just building something stupid on the weekend. And I was like, oh, okay, like that's amazing. I think AI for a developer, it's a joy. Like all that boring, monotonous stuff that you would do, now you can kind of automate that and focus on the stuff that really matters, which is requirements engineering, context engineering, and thinking more about problems versus thinking more about the tools you're going to use, which is the code. And so I think from an engineering point of view, it's exciting. From our point of view with AIs and APIs, the API market is super weird. And I think we're probably the most uniquely positioned to disrupt it. The reason why is, if you look in the API space, the number one is Kong. That's for REST APIs. But Kong is an old company. If you don't know about their history, they came from Mash API like I think 10, 15 years ago. And then they sold it and then they pivoted because they had this cool engine around the gateway, which was open source. There hasn't been an AI company or an API company in a while. You have these other competing into there. And I think this space, if you focus on collaboration, if you focus on collaboration, sorry, I said that one twice, but if you focus on that, and if you focus on adding an AI angle, and then three, if you focus on the graph underneath and connecting everyone's APIs together, I think we're in a very unique position about it. I really do. End of my monologue. But Jens, what do you think? Do you agree with some of those points?
Agree 100%. And I would add one thing. I think so. Like you mentioned, we're in an absolute hype cycle of AI LLMs, and we're probably still haven't reached peak. But what I believe where the true winners will come out is if they don't do there will be like very few, I would say, shovel sellers like OpenAI, but actually, for example, I think like the true winner will probably be someone like Google, because Google with Gemini, they are not burning cash or funding to create Gemini. They have customers, and what OpenAI currently is doing is they buy electricity for $10 and they sell it as ChatGPT for $1 or even
Yeah.
less. I think they buy it for $20 and sell it for one. Like it's 20 to 1 or something. It's absolutely crazy how they lose money on like every time you use ChatGPT, OpenAI, they lose money because they want to take market share. And so I think very few will survive on that end. But where I see the true value, and this is something where, except us, I don't think like so many people invest into that topic, and I call it vertical integration. So instead of doing like models, AI, whatever, use AI in a vertical way. And by that, what I mean is one of our biggest topics is API integration and API governance. This is something
Yeah.
where we currently build a whole product around. And we're leveraging AI for that product in a way that enables workflows that was never possible before. So that means we take API design, API governance, and collaboration. We take that to the next level through the use of AI. I still think like federation is a really good thing to integrate APIs and to put AI on top, so it can also benefit from that AI trend directly, but I think the real value is because before the AI boom, we had people who wanted to do federation, who wanted to have microservices because the company needs them to grow. And even if the whole bubble bursts, people will still have APIs, because if you go to the eBay website, you want to see listings. And that has nothing to do with AI, like bubble burst or not. People will continue shopping, or people will still go to SoundCloud and do things there, or they will go to Paramount and get info about sports or whatever. So all these things, they will continue. What's going to happen to AI? We don't know. What will AI cost in the future? We don't know. What will happen to companies like OpenAI and their products when funding dries up? We don't know. But I can tell you, like 1000%, in the future you will have people who design APIs and who need better tooling for governance and collaboration, and that's what we're focusing on. So I just recently saw a post from someone working for Andreessen Horowitz, and they were asking on Twitter, if you're working on something super boring, I want to talk to you.
Oh,
and
the enterprise one, I saw it too.
Yeah, and collaborative API design, microservice governance is probably one of the most boring things you can think of. Like, go to your friends and tell them, like, it's a bit like, PHP, like, these guys with their Lamborghinis who put on them like paid by PHP. But the point I'm trying to make is,
Or GraphQL in the future.
AI will peak and whatever, but graphical federation, or more specifically, microservices, APIs, collaborative schema design and governance, these kind of things, they will stay forever, and we're working on making them much better with AI. So I don't know, we're insanely excited for that, and maybe we will in some way benefit and ride the AI wave. But even if we don't, at some point, I think every company will need a strategy. How do we build APIs across 10, 20, 50, 100 teams? And currently, I don't see anything that even comes close to federation. And with what we're building today, I think it will take it to the next level. So yeah, I don't know, Stefan. I'm excited for next year, and I'm excited for joining API conferences and talking about like new concepts and really helping people to design better APIs and then to govern them in better ways with great workflows, and ultimately, if you want to, like I said earlier, if you want to enable AI, you need to have a well-designed API, and it needs to be well documented, and there needs to be meaning and use cases. Otherwise, AI can't do anything with it. So, yeah, I think that's where we are.
Well said. And I think it's a great place to end the podcast. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. This might be a record count, but we're happy that you guys are here. We'll be here next week or the week after, but there's definitely going to be guests more coming on. And Jens, I love what you said about A16. Like, what we're working on, it might be boring, but it's critical. And if someone from A16 is watching, we're open to having a conversation with you, you know. But Jens, always a pleasure. Thanks for watching. Everybody, enjoy the weekend. And I think we have a holiday on Monday. So enjoy your holiday, enjoy the long weekend, and we will see you next week.